first time, this is always lovely to see everyone. So, good evening. I'm Ulrike McGregor, and I welcome you to Co-Cathedral of St. John in Manchester. Tonight we will start our lecture series, in which we will reflect on the meaning of Advent and Christmas through the works of art. In each of my 4 reflections during Advent, the first one being tonight, and then the others on December the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th, I will focus on normally 3 works of art. These works are from the 15th through the 20th century and are closely connected with the Gospel reading during Advent. In each case, I will begin with a brief background about the artists, followed by quotes from the Advent Gospel readings, and then, with your help, we will explore and reflect on the work of art. The Advent season, which means coming of the Lord, should be seen as a season of preparation and a time that communicates a message of immense importance. Advent is the beginning of the new liturgical year. The reading during Advent from the prophet Isaiah and the Gospels of Matthew proclaim our need to be in a constant state of alertness and readiness for the coming of Christ. And through the reading of the Annunciation, our need to accept the will of God. These needs are very differently and beautifully represented in the 3 paintings we will study and reflect on tonight. The first painting, The 10 Virgins, is by the British artist John Strudwick, a follower of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. The second painting, St. John the Baptist Preaching, is by Raphael, the preeminent artist of the Renaissance. And the third painting, the Annunciation, is by the American 20th century painter Henry Ossawa Tanner. As some of you might remember, during our Lent and Easter lecture series, we focused mostly on works from the Renaissance and Baroque eras. This time, the majority of the paintings still will be from these 2 periods. However, I would like to include works of art going all the way up to the 20th century. As background, I will now present a brief summary for orientation of the 3 different European artistic eras and movements from which tonight's paintings are from. As you can see, the Renaissance started at 1400 and lasted until 1600. This period has seen many of the world's greatest artists, including Donatello, Sandro Botticelli, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, as you can see here, and Raphael. And Raphael is considered an equal part, together with Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, of the Holy Trinity of master artists of the time. Jumping forward, now we go to the start of the second half of the 19th century. Realism is recognized as the first modern movement in art. It rejected traditional forms of art in the wake of the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. Beginning in France around 1840s, realist painters replaced the idealistic images of traditional art with real-life events. The most famous artists of this period were Gustave Courbet, Edouard Manet, and James Whistler and Thomas Eakins, both from the US. And you can see one of Thomas Eakins' most famous paintings on the screen here. The painter of our 3rd painting we are discussing tonight, Henry Ossawa Tanner, another American, was also an artist working during during the realistic period, in September 1848, a group of young revolutionary British thinkers were William Holman Hunt, John Everett Millais, and Dante Gabriel Rossetti formed the initially secretive Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood pursued the goal of expressing a new moral sincereness and seriousness in their own works of art. They were inspired by Italian art of the 14th and 15th century, depicting the direct and uncomplicated nature of Italian paintings before the higher Renaissance, and in particular, as the name suggests, work before Raphael. Although the Brotherhood's active time was only less than 5 years, its influence on painting in Britain and ultimately on the decorative arts and interior design was profound and lasted until 1890. With this brief overview of the European artistic styles and movements, I would like to turn to our first painting of the evening. This is The 10 Virgins by John Millet Stradrick. It was painted, we believe, in 1884. It wasn't designed, but he presented it at an exhibition at the Grosvenor Gallery in London. Stradrick was an English painter who was active at the very end of the Pre-Raphaelite period. He worked with meticulous attention to detail and often with deep, rich colors. His style developed when he began working as a studio assistant for Burne-Jones, an associate of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood in the 1870s. So please look at the painting, and while I read the 3 quotes from 3 different parables of St. Matthew's Gospel. The first quote is from chapter 24, verse 44. I quote, "Therefore you must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour." The second quote is from chapter 24, verse 50. "The master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour that he does not know." And the third quote is from chapter 25, verse 13. "Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour." In these 3 quotes, Matthew gives us the same pivotal message. Be ready for the coming of Christ. So this painting, The 10 Virgins by Stradrick, depicts beautifully the essential core message of Matthew's parable, and particularly the parable of the 10 bridesmaids. And it's called The 10 Virgins by the artist. So the 10 virgins is depicting the parable of the 10 bridesmaids. And just kind of a quick overview, some may or may not be familiar with. So it's 10 virgins were invited to participate in a wedding ceremony. However, 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. The foolish took no oil to replenish their lamps. However, the wise took flasks of oil with them to sustain their lights when news of the bridegroom impending arrival came. So I will start walking you through the painting, and then I will turn this over to you, and we can start reading this together and starting to interpret this together. This is a beautiful painting, and it's very rich. So I think we can read out of this. Read a lot out of this painting. So there's the bridegroom, it's Christ, and he's surrounded by the 5 wise virgins. We can see them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they're inside the house, and the house is reflecting the heavens. And then from the left, the 5 foolish virgins are approaching. So is anyone would like to comment on this already, or would you like me to kind of move into this a little bit more? And as always, I appreciate, and this is actually my favorite part. I love inviting everyone. I love to hear what you think. I read so much about the paintings while I prepare for it, and I learn a lot, but art is so personal, and I think that's just what's so beautiful about it. Everyone sees something different in it, and it all makes sense. Anyone?
The look on the right is pushing at the door. I think I had that same look. Too late to get the airplane on time.
Yeah.
It's going to be formal.
It's just the realization you just miss it, isn't it? It's just that moment too late, exactly. And I'm just going to point this out. So there's one down here as well. Sometimes this is a bit hard to see. We have one, she's just brushing from the further distant into the painting. And just to kind of familiarize you a little bit more with it, so what happened was that initially all the 10 bridesmaids were waiting together. And actually they all fell asleep together. Because again, it's neither of us knows when Christ will come again. So it's not being wise, it's not that they knew anything that the others didn't. So they actually all fell asleep together. But then the news came that Jesus was arriving, or the bridegroom was arriving. However, the wise women, they could light, and it's actually, the translation is torch. So, and then they had the oil, and then you can light the torch. The other women hadn't brought an extra flask, so they lit their torches, but they went out, and then they couldn't replenish it. And then the wise virgins told them, you need to go and buy some. But the foolish said, well, why don't you share this with us? Why don't you share what you have? And one would expect, so, and maybe even disappointed, why wouldn't you share it? But the wise one said, well, if we share with you, then there's just half of it, first of all. And then at the end of the day, neither of us can light the path, or lit the path for the bridegroom. And also in the Bible, it is kind of, if we start translating this, we all have to prepare for ourselves, unfortunately. Our sinful lives, luckily, will not have an impact on our children, and vice versa. So we, unfortunately, just because we have a saint in our family, doesn't mean, because he went to heaven, it kind of blends up. I mean, we might be better people as well, but it doesn't mean we are going to be saved, so we still have to do the work ourselves.
I'm kind of struck by, the one in blue seems so kind of attentive, and the one that's agonizing there. Yeah. So the contrast, showing that contrast, is kind of revealing to me.
Oh yeah, because I think he wanted to depict the different ways how we deal with disappointment as well. I think there's different ways, and she's still trying. I mean, she is still hopes the door will open. And I think she has given up. She has realized it's not going to happen. She's sad, and so I think on the left we really want to see different responses to the message. Yes?
I'm kind of struck by the
Really?
reading.
Thank you.
I'm kind of struck by the blue color of her garment, which is often associated with Mary, isn't it?
I know.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything sort of symbolic there or significant.
Yeah. Coming back to our colors, we have that quite often at Lent as well, and I fully agree. I mean, first of all, it's so startling, and yes, usually it is associated with Mary, the heavenly color. I haven't come across any particular interpretation why this woman, or this virgin was chosen to be in blue. Because, yeah, I think here the connection with Mary probably doesn't hold true. So, but it is a stunning color. That's, yeah.
And dressed so elegant.
Yes, and that's the Pre-Raphaelite style. If you look at other Pre-Raphaelite paintings, if you're familiar with it, or if you go home and look at it, they have these beautiful, big, and quite often red hair. They're dressed so beautifully, and the colors that the Pre-Raphaelites use are usually very rich and warm, and just very satisfying to look at. Yep.
It's almost as if, I mean, it's the same blue that Christ is wearing inside. And for me, it's like, it's almost as if she was really close with Christ, but even though you can prepare and you can think that you're ready, you can think that you're close, the time comes
and that's a beautiful thought, because again, kind of, if we're thinking beforehand, they were all together, and they were all virgins, so we're all the same, and then exactly, so we all are Christians, but some are prepared better, and they will make it. So along the line you were saying, it's exactly true. I mean, and we might think we make it, but it's still through Christ who will allow us to enter heaven or not. So, yeah, and it's also about, so Christ is depicted with the halo, and even the 5 bridesmaids have a gentle halo as well. And they're still elegantly and very similarly dressed, but their colors are a little bit muted, and I think it's also maybe it's contrast a little bit our earthly life. We are very much focused on what we wear and how we look, but then again, once we in heaven, that becomes non-existent or not important at all. And I think it's also looking at this. There's also a moment or a point of no return. Unfortunately, as we think about it's believed that when the second coming of Christ is at hand, we are either in or out. So right now we still are in a good position. We constantly can adjust and change our life, and then hopefully be ready at the time.
So we've been talking about the people, but I'm just wondering about the trees and the leaves and the trees and the leaves and what might be the significance of that, or why Harris made those a prominent part of the painting as well, because they draw my eye, the trees and the leaves.
So I think the pre-Raphaelites were very much interested in nature, and they very often in their paintings would depict nature as it was. So that's a little bit the idea of during Renaissance and Raphael, he would beautify everything. I mean, if you look at his Madonnas, they're heavily beautiful. So the pre-Raphaelites, even though they idolize some of it, but they're also very much interested in nature. And I think he just wanted to use the adornment, and that's including. And he was very detail oriented. There's some paintings of his where he is an interior setting and he paints furniture, and they're painstakingly detailed. He paints a chair that has a carving on the side, and I mean it's like the original indeed. So I think with flowers and the greenery, he is definitely adornment, but he was very precise to pick that.
Last thing for me is, it's hard to make out on the projector, but if you zoom in, I did on my phone, there are bells in that window behind the Virgin with her hand on the door. And the bell is, it looks like two bells, yeah, right there. And one of them is sideways as if they had been ringing.
Yes.
Which makes me feel like, people, you don't ring bells when something is starting, right? You ring them to alert people that something is going to be happening. And so it makes it seem as if, maybe they were going out for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or whatever, but people had warning. People had time to say, okay, it's time to go. This is what we've been preparing for.
Yeah.
And it's just funny to me that they're still going in there.
Yeah. So again, yes, and it's also, I think it's the immediacy. So yeah, he was there. The wedding is starting. Again, kind of, they missed it.
Kind of reminds me of the look, we're so used to in our society now to instant communication, instant gratification. I even see it in young colleagues that I mentor, new nurses, and they're used to not having to prepare much at that time because they can get so much at their fingertips on a computer and all the equipment that we use to monitor patients. But there's also an art and a caring to medicine that I sometimes think is starting to get forgotten, and in society in general, that care for other people and preparing and thinking ahead and the planning. And I just chuckle to myself at some of those expressions because I see that frequently, like, well, I didn't think of that. Well, let's talk about that because you probably should have, and then you do the education and go from there. That makes me chuckle a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's the time of Advent to give us the opportunity to be prepared, right? And not, but still, isn't it funny how many times we catch ourselves and it's Christmas Eve and you're like, I still haven't gotten that Christmas gift for Susie. Right? So, unfortunately,
I just noticed how the door is very narrow. Like the way to Christ is through the narrow door.
Oh, okay.
Very,
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't quite catch that. Referring to the reading of that the needle burn, or that we need to squeeze through. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I think just one more observation.
Sure.
We can see all of the women, the five who have forgotten their oil. We can see their full bodies. We can see the landscaping. We can see it's all painted, but we just get this tiny glimpse of heaven, right? I mean, just through a tiny little window,
Yeah.
and we just see the faces, which I think is kind of interesting. I mean, we know the world, right? We know how it is, and we know the trials and tribulations, and we think we might know what heaven is like. But anyway, that's what I see.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic observation. It's true, because you would always think, it's like, okay, make this a bit bigger, right? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. I want to see the parking.
Yes. So, this is a wonderful discussion. And, like always, I kind of have a couple of points, but you got them all. You're becoming experts. And just a quick personal note, came out of COVID, and we haven't, I mean, now it's better for the last 6 or 9 months, and we started to travel again, but there was this period where we couldn't go anywhere, so we spent a lot of time on the internet and looking at paintings or art or anything. And it's fine, but it still makes quite a difference if we have the opportunity to see paintings live. And so with this painting, I had the opportunity to see it because it was for sale at Sotheby's in 2016 when I was working with Sotheby's, and I was doing my master's at the Institute of Art at Sotheby's. And they had it, we always had the opportunity to see the paintings beforehand while they were just hanging them up, and we would spend some time with the more senior people at Sotheby's and discussing the paintings. And so when I was preparing for this reflection tonight, I thought I have to include this because when you see a picture live and you were able to spend some time with it, it's becoming kind of yours. It's one of my favorite paintings, and so it was sold at Sotheby's in 2016, and I think it sold around £500,000 at the time. So
You decided not to buy it.
I decided no. I thought I would just leave it for the other. Yeah, and that's with the auction house. That's quite often the case, isn't it? The rich and famous sell and buy the art, and it doesn't really trickle down to the workers in the job there. So I hope I inspired you to look at some other really choreographed paintings. They're just wonderful, and there's a lot to read in them. So I would like to move on to our second painting of the evening. It's the Saint John the Baptist preaching by Raphael. It was painted in 1505. Raphael only lived for 37 prolific and passionate years throughout the epochs of the Italian High Renaissance. His true lust for life translated onto the canvas, where his skill in presenting the Renaissance ideals of beauty was breathtakingly new. His training began when he was just a child. He learned in his painter's father's workshop and went on to run one of the largest workshops of its kind in his adult life. He garnered a reputation as one of the most productive artists of his time. Although largely known for his paintings, and many of which can be seen at the Vatican Palace, where he frescoed the Raphael rooms, and this was his largest body of work during his career. He was also an architect, printmaker, and expert draftsman. In other words, a true Renaissance man. This painting, St. John the Baptist preaching, was part of an altarpiece for a family chapel dedicated to St. Nicholas in Perugia. The altarpiece would have consisted of a main panel, and I'm kind of recreating this. This is not really how it looks. I just wanted to show how it would hang together. So the altarpiece would consist of a main panel featuring the enthroned Virgin and Christ child, flanked by St. Nicholas on the right and St. John the Baptist on the left. And then below the panel, a horizontal pair of painting pens, collectively known as the predella, would depict narrative scenes of the lives of the saint, features in the main panel above. The scene would have been placed beneath the figure of St. John, so John the Baptist preaching would kind of hang here underneath St. John, and then later also John is pointing up, and then he would have pointed at himself in the main panel And then in the main panel, he was actually pointing at Christ. And then on the other side, it would have been a painting of St. Nicholas, representing one of his miracles. And then, however, that has not survived for me. It hasn't been found, and it would have been on this side then, kind of underneath St. Nicholas. So now, please look at the painting while I read a quote from the Gospel of the second Sunday reading of Advent. And I will quote from St. Matthew's chapter 3, verse 1 to 3. John the Baptist appeared, preaching in the desert of Judea, and saying, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." So with this, I would like to just warm you up, so now we can just dive right into this again and see if we can read this painting. I think it's usually we tend to read a painting from the left to the right, but I think in this case it almost helps to read it from the right to the left. So you obviously clearly can identify St. John. He's wearing his camel skin, and he's wearing a billowing red cloak on top of it. And it's hard to see here, but he's holding the reed cross in his left hand, and he's pointing up. And earlier we saw he's actually pointing at himself, but he's also pointing to heaven and telling us about the second coming of Christ, or of the coming of Christ. Interestingly, even though the title would suggest that we should be mostly interested in St. John the Baptist, but I think actually this painting clearly tells us we should look at the crowd and at all the people that come to listen to St. John. And Raphael gave each and every a very individual personality through their clothing. None of the figures wears the same color combination, for example. They all wear rather different headgear. And so he really wanted to present a variety of people that come to listen to St. John. And so we have 4 groups of figures listening to St. John. We have a group right in the front here, and then if you look at this figure, he's just wrapped in attention. He listens to every single word. He wants to really understand what St. John is saying. And similarly, I would say the other figures in the front as well. They're very interested and very attentive. Then how about, I thought this group was also very, very interesting. If we look at their headgear and we kind of follow what happens to the headgear, there's also a part in the Gospel where St. John says, and I quote this, when he saw many of the Pharisees and Sadducees coming to the baptism, he said to them, "You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the coming wrath?" And if we look really closely, I would say this looks like a serpent. It's not like a snake's head just upside down. So I think Raphael really read the Gospel and very literally tried to depict the different figures that are being spoken about in the gospel.
That was one of my first classes. That it's quite a collection of humanity. Looks like there's a little bit of everything there.
Yeah.
You know? And I think of our community gathered, or of the world, or, you know, we are quite a mix. And he's really demonstrating this. Huh?
Yeah.
Because some are looking away, as you said, and others are attentive. And so it is a sense of humanity searching, and some not so interested. It seems.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think if you look at this group as well, they're rather skeptical.
Yeah.
Kind of, if you put your hand up on your hips, you're like, I'm not so sure that's all right what you're saying there.
The guy with the belly is not happy.
Oh, there's actually just two, before I forget, at the very bottom of the handout, there is a link to a website, and it's from the National Gallery together with King's College, and they put together a series of 10 videos about the life and death of St. John, and it's a really neat collection. They're 8 minutes long, so it's just nice to kind of go through that. And they were commenting on this gentleman, and he's a professor at King's College, and they are actually offering a master's degree in Christian art. So if you want to spend a year in London, that's what you want to do. So he was calling, this gentleman is probably more worried about his dinner tonight than really what St. John has to say. And then, so there's a fourth group in the far distance, and they're just kind of bystanders. They're probably just curious and have heard about someone coming and speaking and bringing out the new news. They're probably just nosy, because they're probably too far away to even be able to hear what St. John has to say.
Is it possible that the focus, and maybe you've already said this, is clearly much more on the humanity than it is on John? Yeah, because this whole thing about eating locusts and honey and kind of being rejected, you don't see that image of John the Baptist in this rendering, no?
Right, yeah. I definitely I agree with that. It's very much what is the congregation? Who is listening to the news? And obviously, St. John is very serious. I mean, he has a very stern face. He knows how important it is to bring across his news and make the people listen. Yeah, and then obviously, what about these guys, right? Any comments on that?
Looking at St. John's face, it's got a very rough look, very serious look. And, it strikes me as, this isn't a happy picture, this is the happy scene. He yells out, repent, the time of salvation is at hand, or whatever it is. So he's got a really serious message. And I think that's reflected in his face.
Yes, oh, absolutely. I mean, he's very stern. Yes, yeah. And I think they are beautiful. Obviously, Raphael is well known for painting babies or cooties. And it could be seen as Christ and St. John. We have seen there's many paintings when they're depicted as young children, as babies. And there's also another part in the Gospel reading, and I'm just going to quote on that as well, where John proclaims, "For I tell you, God can raise up children to Abraham from these stones." And the babies are sitting on a stone, and again, I think Raphael was trying to be very literal with his depiction of the gospel reading.
I do think it's kind of interesting that there are very few women.
Very few women in the congregation, and especially with those little babies. You know, you would think they'd be sort of clinging to a mother figure or something, but I see one or two maybe that look like women to me, which I thought was kind of.
They all have a headdress though, so you can't really tell.
Right, but that's actually just to bring in my husband here. He's always my first audience, so when I feel pretty ready, then he's listening to what I have to say. Now I'm prepared for giving the presentation here. And interestingly, at the kind of first run through, I said, "Oh, the crowd of men," and Chris said, "Well, aren't they women?" And I thought, I mean, first of all, if we set it into historical context, I don't think there were many women around at that time to begin with. And then we started to look a little bit more closely. And yeah, I fully agree. There definitely weren't a lot of women. And I think that's really, even probably during the 16th century, women were just not part of a lot of the events. And certainly, if Raphael was thinking 1500 years earlier than that, women were just not part of congregation or going somewhere, participating. Yeah.
You know, I did notice that the clothing is very different from how I would view clothing of the time of John the Baptist. So to me, it looks more like modern Renaissance clothing than early Roman-esque Empire, early Jerusalem kind of clothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that we might have touched upon that as well in earlier paintings during Lent. I think that's kind of what artists like to do too, even though they very much want to adhere and depict the biblical readings, but that's kind of their thing then. So they're lifting the reading out of the original times and make it kind of modern. Because again, if we didn't think in 1505, this was a very fashionable painting, or when it was set where it's in a chapel. I mean, that was sensational, right? At that point, being able to ask Raphael, the painter, the artist, to paint something for your own chapel. I don't know even with what you can compare that today. I mean, that's just amazing, right?
I was looking at the pose of St. John, and it's very, his left foot, or one on the right, is very graceful, but it also looks like he's stepping forward. Is that correct?
Oh, like here?
No, the other way.
Oh, yeah, kind of stepping sideways a little bit.
Yeah, kind of like he's about to step off the cliff almost. I don't know. That was the impression.
Yeah. Or it also could give him a better stand. I mean, kind of making himself, we kind of tend to do that as well, kind of spreading out a little bit to give ourselves a greater importance as well. And I think also his bellowing flow coming out, obviously it's kind of visualizing that, what Raphael clothes him with, but that is very voluminous compared to the other clothing, which is just slightly more mundane. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Religious paintings are always full of charms and things. Boutique, I think they're called.
Yeah.
Might that be a reference that John the Baptist and Jesus were cousins?
I think so. Yes. Yeah, very much so. Because particularly Raphael liked there's a couple of his works of art where he painted the two together very much at this stage. Yeah. So, time is rushing on. I think we should move on actually to our third painting of the evening. And so the last painting of tonight is the Annunciation by Henry Osawa Tanner. Tanner was born in 1859 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and died in 1937 in Paris, France. Tanner is one of the leading religious genre painters of his age, with a great sense of realism, and he was the first African-American artist to gain international fame. Tanner was the son of a Methodist minister in Pennsylvania. At the age of 20, he enrolled at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts as its first African-American attendee. And he was the student of the realist painter Thomas Eakins, a painting that we saw earlier in the operation. In 1891, Tanner had the opportunity to travel to Europe. He settled in Paris, and it was there that he made the important decision to focus on painting religious scenes. Tanner left a great mark on the art world socially as the first African-American artist who redefined religious painting for the modern era. So let us now reflect on the painting while I quote chapter 1, verse 30 and 38 of the Gospel of St. Luke. I quote, "The angel said to her, 'Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God.' Then Mary said, 'Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word.' Then the angel departed from her." I specifically, obviously, chose a painting that maybe not necessarily everyone has seen before. I encourage you to spend some time in the internet and go through and search the Annunciation. You will find a huge selection. It's one of the themes in the Bible that has been depicted the most. And however, we are usually used to a very traditional depiction of the Annunciation. And I think this is slightly different. Would anyone like to start with it?
I think some of the other depictions that I've seen is very open and accepting of it. And this one is kind of a, how is this going to work again? Kind of look of some being perplexed. And to think about it, who wouldn't be?
Yes.
That kind of moves.
She looks so young.
She looks
Young.
oh yes,
And she
yes.
was.
Yeah.
And she was.
She was, yes.
I love this painting, and what strikes me, I kind of feel a little differently about it. I would love to see a painting next to the older Mary right there, because I see in her face just this trust, which has always fascinated me. I remember talking about it with our confirmation kids, going, she was your age, you guys. I mean, how crazy is that? But to me, she looks trustful. And then our statue in there, I love so much because you know she doesn't know everything coming at this stage. And then in later life, that peace she arrived at after all the horrible things that happened, she knew there was a purpose and trust in that. I see this really cool contrast between this painting and our statue. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I just see her humility, her humbleness, by the way her body language and her humility. That's what I see.
Yeah.
I suppose that I am fascinated that there is no angel in this painting, and that the focus, I mean, I'm drawn to light, but the light illumines Mary. So it's very much a question to me, is the light the Holy Spirit, or is the light supposed to be an angel? Like, what is the light, I guess?
Yeah, beautiful.
The drapery that is like surrounding Mary reminds me of that, like in the Pietà, which you showed a picture of early, and it just feels like very full circle to me, like a very similar image at like the beginning and like the quote unquote end of like her journey to Mother Christ.
Yeah, oh, beautiful. Those are wonderful observations. And yes, absolutely. If I kind of pull this all together a little bit, I think, yes, more startling is the representation that he chose to represent Angel Gabriel as a burst of light or a shaft of light, which is a different description we can use. And it is the only source of light in the room, and it illuminates Mary so beautifully. And just something to point out, if we look behind here, there's a horizontal bookshelf. And so this actually forms a cross. So in this painting, we already have the foreshadowing of the crucifixion of Christ at the same time as the incarnation. I thought that was beautiful. And I agree with the description of Mary. I mean, she is, obviously she was sleeping, most likely she was sleeping. I think she was lying in bed and this flash of light came into her room and woke her up. And she was certainly surprised, but she's not afraid. And I think that's a beautiful, and she's faithful. She has her hands clasped together. She trusts in the message she hears. She's accepting what she hears. And again, that's kind of, I think, what Annunciation tries to tell us. Listen to the message and trust in it, and kind of go with it. I mean, because she really went with it, right? She didn't question, she didn't negotiate a better deal. She just kind of really, she went with it. And the Pietà, that's so beautiful. I never even thought about this. This is so beautiful. And it's true, it's because in the Pietà, we have the beautiful clothes kind of falling down around her. And just kind of, she's dressed in rather muted colors. And usually Mary is represented in blue, right? But if you look over here, there is actually a blue cloak, but it's almost like it's waiting for her. So she wasn't Queen Mary yet, but through this she will become our queen, and then the blue cloak is ready for her, so she can wear it. And then also the red background, I think again is a foreshadowing of Christ, his suffering, and the blood he will shed for us. And yes, so to come back to Michelle's question, what is it? Is it the Holy Spirit? Or is it the angel itself? But then again, I would say Angel Gabriel presented the message of God, which is as a glowing message as well, and so that's why I think it illuminates Mary. In one of so Tanner said when he presented his painting, which is so different. I mean, it's absolutely memorable. It's someone said, well, almost kind of, why did you paint an angel? And he said, well, I've lived and studied through realism. I don't know, I've never seen an angel. I believe in angels, but I don't know what an angel looks like. So why not, and the message of God is such a glowing message, so I think that's what inspired him to paint it as this glowing light. And also Tanner was trying to put humanity into his paintings, and he wanted to depict an extraordinary event that happened to an eventually extraordinary person, but she was an ordinary woman, and so extraordinary things can come and happen to us in the most ordinary places. I think that was definitely something he wanted to bring across too. And we know that Tanner had the opportunity also to travel to the Middle East twice, and he probably brought back some of the carpets and the pottery. He was very fascinated by Orientalism, and he wanted to depict seeing as kind of realistic as possible, so he was in Palestine. So it is, the hour is over, and I just, I guess we're going to finish with this, and I think Tanner, it's fair to say he has broken with the traditional Annunciation iconography to create a truly inspiring and unforgettable masterpiece. He has taken his Christian belief and combined them with the best of realism to create something novel and unique. Thank you very much.